Welcome to this edition of Security and Compliance Weekly. Today, we welcome Matt Erickson, who's VP of Solutions for today's sponsor, SpiderOak Mission Systems. Matt is going to guide us in a discussion of the challenges involved with protecting digital communications and collaboration across both local and remote systems for the federal and the private sector space. We'll start with a discussion of the challenges facing both the public and private sectors. We'll discuss how emerging technologies and methodologies address these problems, and we'll learn about what SpiderOak is doing to help address these issues as well. All this and more as we continue our journey of tearing down silos and building bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly. Some things are best kept secret. You wouldn't send your company's financial data through the mail on a postcard. Then why would you let your employees use insecure collaboration and file share tools to share sensitive business information? Introducing Crossclave, a file sharing and collaboration solution built secure from the ground up. Think Signal, only designed specifically for business and enterprise users. Crossclave uses blockchain technology and end-to-end encryption to deliver a true zero-trust system designed to protect you and your business's most valuable data. So if you need to share sensitive information, SpiderOak's Crossclave is your only choice. Go to securityweekly.com/SpiderOak and get a free account with 5 gigabytes of storage.
Welcome to episode 82 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on August 10th, 2021. I'm your host, Mr. Jeff Mann, and I am joined remotely today by the singular Mr. Josh Marpet. Josh, welcome.
Why, thank you. Pleasure to be here as always.
It's just us today, and this is a landmark day because Mr. Scott Lyons, this is the first time he's ever missed an episode, so he's broken his streak. But he's on an airplane flying back from Las Vegas after gooning at DEF CON this past week.
Okay.
I will miss him. And I, too, was in Vegas last week. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit during the course of today's show.
I think that's a great idea.
We have a few announcements before we jump into it. Here's some exciting news. SC Media, which is also a part of the Cyber Risk Alliance, has debuted its all-new SC digital experience, which is fully integrated with the Security Weekly podcast content and more. The new site increases the scope and scale of original content resources from the editorial staff and contributors. From contributors and the far-reaching Cyber Risk Alliance network. If you want to check it out, visit www.scmagazine.com. Take a new look, and if you dig far enough under the podcast category, you'll see our show. It's kind of cool. Also, Security Weekly Unlocked will be held in person this December 5th through 8th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. We're excited to announce our first round of speakers, who will include such notable luminaries as David Kennedy, Alyssa Miller, O'Shea Bowens, Marina Chiavata, Patrick Coble, Chris Eng, Eric Escobar, Kevin Johnson, and Justin Kohler. Visit securityweekly.com/unlocked to register and check out our speaker lineup. Okay, enough of that. Let's jump into our discussion today. As mentioned in the opening segment, we are joined today by Mr. Matt Erickson. He is VP of Solutions at SpiderOak. Matt, welcome to the show.
Hi, great to be here.
And great to see another balded, bearded man on the show today, right, Josh?
You know, it's really the best when the hair migrates from here to here.
It is. I'll never understand as a fellow bald person why so much hair grows on other parts of your body everywhere but the top of your head. But perhaps that's another issue for another day.
Yeah. My daughter just says that I'm a warm, fuzzy blanket. Life is good, you know? I mean, come on.
There you go. It's not to be overrated, I guess. So Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into cybersecurity, and ultimately how you ended up where you are today at SpiderOak.
Well, I've been at SpiderOak for over 10 years now. So kind of a short story leading up to I've just been here forever. I got started in climate science, actually, at U of I Champaign. Did some research programming there. And wound up being a customer of SpiderOak's before I started working here. Combination of my housemate was working at SpiderOak, and also I was working with sensitive information as relates to climate science. There's a lot of sensitive data that's used to process to run climate models against. And so I was using SpiderOak to back that up. And eventually I wound up being SpiderOak's first mobile developer. Wound up running through engineering roles, VP engineering, moved over, now VP solutions. So most of my career has actually just been SpiderOak. So slightly boring story about how I wound up here, but
well, it's slightly boring, but it's also slightly intriguing because those of us that have been in the industry a long time have often made several career moves, either voluntarily or involuntarily. So it's relatively rare to meet somebody that has a long tenure at one company. I mean, you've basically spent your entire career at one company. So
yeah,
that begs the question. Tell us a little bit about what SpiderOak is all about and what makes it such a great company to still be a part of after all these years.
Yeah. So SpiderOak, I guess, is the OG Zero Trust company. When we got started, the founders didn't want to deal with having the responsibility of the plaintext data from users on their systems. And we just kept going from there. So our original solution, which is now what we call One Backup, got started with really interesting key management. Because those of us who grew up with crypto solutions.
No. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. It was lazy key management. It was you handle your own keys because we don't feel like doing it. Okay, come on. Just here's your key. Go away. Handle your own key.
I mean, one man's lazy,
really
another man's easy.
Key management.
Well, okay. So, if you want to talk about key management at the time, looking around, what else would you have to encrypt anything with before sending it off to the cloud? Which the cloud keyword for somebody else's computer. And so what are you going to do? PGP and keep that somewhere? I mean, the PGP key servers is almost this littered history of people forgetting their previous passphrase and moving on to the next one.
Hey, I resemble that remark, okay? I must have 17 identities on the MIT key server, let's be honest.
Right? And
so
then
what you're saying is I should give up on all those floppy disks I have because I'm never going to remember the passphrase, and I might as well throw it.
And the one with 30,000 bitcoins, yeah, you're never getting that back. Sorry.
No, that's Tyler.
No, that's just done. Yeah, so I mean, SpiderOak boiled it down to a username and password, and the password was actually stretched to be your key. So as long as you could remember your password, or have a device that is online. If you've forgotten your password, you could just change it from that app. And that's how we got started. And we wound up in the enterprise space with that, wound up serving a bunch of, variety of customers. And so a few years ago, we started looking around thinking okay, well, backup's cool and all, but what else is there? And we started work on what is now Crossplay and the platform that powers it underneath it. But how can we do this collaboratively? How can we, because SpiderOak One Backup isn't really designed to work well with multiple people. It's just backing up your stuff. And maybe your corporate administrator can work with you on that and peek in. But really, it's just your stuff goes to the cloud and it's safe there. Whereas, it's a very collaborative world today. We have a variety of actually really great solutions to work together. And all of them are kind of terrifying to extremely terrifying if you're thinking about putting actually sensitive information on there. So we started work on the system that's now grown to Crossclave and the SpiderOak platform underneath. So that's our shtick.
Okay, before we get too far into the weeds, and talking crypto and encryption is always a fun topic for me. We are, of course, Security and Compliance Weekly, and we start each of our interviews with what we call the hot seat question. And the question is simply this. And this is not a right or wrong response that we're looking for. We're just trying to get a little bit of a sense of your perspective on this whole thing that we like to call the security versus compliance continuum. So where do you fall in this thing called security versus compliance?
I definitely understand the difference. There's a lot of compliance that's based off of making sure you've ticked boxes just enough to get somebody who actually doesn't know security happy with you. But I think done well, a good compliance regime, hypothetically speaking, administered by people who get security, can really help a lot of organizations with a much better security posture online. So,
admit it, sir, you went to law school.
I did some privacy lobbying for a while, so hard question.
We come to the root of the matter. You, sir, are a lobbyist.
Oh no! But I mean, privacy falls into that as well. Like that's
no, it does. It does. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's a three-way Venn diagram, and ideally, you'll find the spot right in the middle.
Right.
So I'd really, if you don't mind, let's take a couple of seconds and talk about that, because you're the first one that I can recall that said, there's security, compliance, and by the way, it's privacy. It's a three-way, not just a two-way spectrum. And I really like that. That's fascinating. And do you think that privacy should and can be segregated out from the security and compliance as privacy is separate from?
Yeah, it's a separate topic. Like, look at Google's business model. I have nothing but praise for Google's security efforts.
Right.
And, you can set up your G Suite to have all the tick boxes that you need for a variety of regulated industries.
Right.
But their privacy, their business is built off of having weak privacy from Google. I know that Google Apps are supposed to not be scanned by Google for their advertising purposes. But if you're thinking about like just a small solo practitioner who might just have a personal Gmail account, their data is not by definition private in exchange for this free service. Another thing to look at is, I'm just going to say this and then drop it and not touch it with a 10-foot pole. But the recent stuff going on around Apple and their content scanning that they're talking about. Again, it's a compliance thing, and they're trying to fit security and privacy around that as well. It's a very active and energetic topic, like how you get that Venn diagram. Ideally, you want to be in the center, right? And compliance is a tool, in theory, where you can have some common yardstick to measure both privacy and security from. And I understand that in a lot of giant organizations or the government, you wind up with compliance being its own end goal outside of the purposes why you're going through a regulatory process to begin with. But
I see the pain. I see the furrows in your brow, sir. You've done this. Okay.
Oh, man.
Well, but I want to, Jeff, hang on 1 second. I just want to finish off that one little thought there. So first off, in terms of the Apple photo scanning, two things. One is, but I mean, think of the children, you horrible person. I'm joking, relax. That's how everything starts, with think of the children. And then it just goes, well, if we just look for pictures of drugs, hey, we'll find some and then we can arrest them and make money. Amazing. Don't get me started. But if you just turn off your iCloud photos and use, for example, your Amazon Prime, which gives you free photos in full resolution, any amount of photos you want, hey, I mean, I'm just saying. Anyway,
Amazon's going to be scanning anyway.
Hey,
donuts.
It's going to be scanned. Just get used to it, man. It's just going to be scanned. Don't you understand? That's the price of progress. And then I bring out the joke where, do you know the difference between a tech enthusiast and an actual technologist?
No.
What a tech enthusiast A tech enthusiast has smart home everything. They've got a Google Assistant over there, an Alexa glued to their ceiling, like an Apple Home, whatever the thing is, wherever. Their house answers to them. Their walls, open up and have like TV screens glued everywhere, like tiles, and then like the whole house answers to them. And a technologist has a printer with a baseball bat next to it in case it starts talking.
You're not wrong. There's a former cyber intelligence professional that I know, and he's retired, living the life. He has an Alexa in his home, and it's purposely left unplugged unless he's cooking.
Yeah, no, for timers more than anything else. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And they just don't talk about anything while they're cooking, anything important, and that's it.
Yeah, I have not a single Alexa, Google Home, or anything in the house other than the Roku, and we have the one that doesn't, I believe, have Alexa enabled on it, which makes me very happy. It's getting harder to find those. So anyway, I apologize, Jeff. I interrupted you before. Please go ahead.
No, that's fine. I wanted to harken back to a statement you said early on, Matt, about back in the day. And what were the options for encryption? And I sort of chuckled because I as I am wont to do, I'm going to bring up PCI, and PCI has been out the data security standards since 2004, and there has always been a requirement to encrypt data at rest, specifically credit card data. And yet, in those early days, and probably the first 5 or 6 years, there were effectively no options for encrypting any of that data. A lot of the data was sitting in databases, and none of the database providers back in those days had an encryption option, or if they did, it was very expensive and hard to implement. So, I don't know how much your company grew up around compliance or specifically PCI, but what makes a company, I guess, decide to there's a market here, there's a gap here where we should provide encryption solutions, unless all of the people that started the company came out of the DoD, which for all I know they did. What makes a commercial company decide to get into this kind of thing?
So first off, our founders were probably the most opposite of DoD people you can imagine. In fact, one of our original tech co-founders is now working with Zcash pretty closely. So what makes people want to do this? I mean, people want the Star Trek future, right?
Right.
But so the Enterprise has terrible cybersecurity because the computer gets hacked and the ship gets taken over every other week, right? But
it's got replicators, Earl Grey hot.
Yeah, and out comes like Slimer and attacks the room. But really, people have, it's such a fearless embrace of technology that you get out of Star Trek that is really cool. And technologists want to go to your earlier comment about smart home gear. You want to just ask the house to get you some tea and it appears on your desk. Wouldn't that be amazing? But to do that fearlessly, you really need to have those assurances of security and privacy. And that's really what got us going originally, to be able to make use of cloud computing. And this is 2006, 2007. Dropbox itself didn't exist until 2009. The iPhone was announced in 2006, released in 2007, maybe off by a year or two here. But this is when a smartphone meant a BlackBerry or a Nokia. Yep. Remember those things? They were great. And like cloud services. Yeah,
because they worked like a communicator. You had to flip it open to talk.
Exactly. Oh, I used to have one of those. It was pretty baller. Could run Python on it. But that was smartphones, and if you were lucky, you had 3 megabit DSL. Woo. So that's when SpiderOak really got rolling with this. In terms of being able to, this is a brave new world out there. How can we actually use it safely? And you make full use of it because you're not worried about who's looking over your shoulder. And that's what really drove SpiderOak, not some DoD use case. It turns out that the DoD themselves wear tinfoil hats. So they're a pretty natural fit for us in terms of marketing and sales. But it's not some DoD use case. Yeah, I mean,
because that's why I have no hair, because of my past tinfoil hat wearing days.
Oh, you haven't heard about the metal foil issue with? Never mind. Anyway, so I got to say, I remember when SpiderOak was one of the only choices, and the fact that I could encrypt it locally with my key and then upload the encrypted blob, and SpiderOak had no knowledge, full zero knowledge, zero trust of what I was uploading, was amazing, because it meant that I could actually guarantee who had access.
Yeah.
And I remember consulting to companies who were like, well, how do we guarantee that? Because they had contracts even back then, 2008, 2009, 2010, depending. How can we guarantee that our third-party provider, our backup provider, a lot of people were using SpiderOak for backups, they do not have access. I'm like, well, encrypt it locally. They're like, well, does that mean they don't have access? I'm like, if you don't give them the key, they can't decrypt it. They're like, how sure are you of that? I'm pretty sure on that.
Yeah.
They're like, well, like, when could they decrypt it? I'm like, 4, maybe 6. Like, yeah. I'm like, million years from now. And they went, oh, we don't care about that. I'm like, right. So SpiderOak was actually pretty popular. I used it I recommend it to my clients a lot back 10, 15 years ago. But, I'll be honest with you, and I'm going, not after your company, but I'm talking about it. Like, I haven't heard much about SpiderOak recently. I just, offense, I just haven't. Talk to me. Why is SpiderOak, what are you doing now?
So SpiderOak, after looking at the backup market, which is very margin driven, like talk to anybody who does online backups, and some of our competition, you can see how they're clearly using tape just to keep those margins down, because at some point, spinning platters of rust can only get so cheap.
I have a friend that calls it spinning rust. Yes.
So, it can only get so cheap before you're just talking about the cost of iron dust on metal platters. And so we started looking at the collaboration market, and so we've been in a bit of a pivot reboot with moving to collaboration tools, first Semicore and now Crossclave, which includes chat, file share, eventually video conferencing. And we've also been getting into space, actually, because satellites are, this is security and compliance, and not spaceships and Captain Picard Weekly, but bald heads. But
we can boldly go where no one has gone before on this podcast.
But space is, coming back to a lot of traditional infrastructure. Space is still important. We're using imaging capabilities that 10 years ago were military only, and now you can just go to Planet or Maxar and just start downloading imagery for both your own products or like hedge funds counting cars in parking lots. You might be deploying new infrastructure to help bolster up like power or telecom or health, and have to hit communication satellites. And up until recently, the security model for satellites was, well, nobody else can talk to it.
I was at HD Moore's talk about hacking Mars using VxWorks, and I was like, oh my God, you can get at Mars using a damn near obsolete, real-time operating system? And he was like, uh-huh.
Oh gosh, you can, today, roughly about $100 in parts. The Air Force calls it the Nyan Sat, after, Nyan Cat, that Pop-Tart rainbow cat thing. $100 a part, so the Raspberry Pi and some actuators. You can basically talk to any satellite in low Earth orbit now, which is basically most of them. Like, all the really interesting stuff is still in low Earth orbit. Now
the Starlink is in low Earth orbit, isn't it?
Starlink, Planet, a bunch of government stuff. There's a term coming out of Air Force research called the hybrid space architecture, which is how can the government actually make use of commercial space for national requirements. So it's a kind of a wild west currently, because either you have your own bespoke security that can't talk to anything else, but on the same side you have Amazon Ground Station, Azure Orbital, Azure Space, and putting the cloud in the cloud. How do you secure that? And that's where SpiderOak comes in. That's we've been doing a lot of work on that, combined with our collaboration product. And so it's taken a while. Encryption tools, definitely. That's a very long story of why you haven't heard that much from us up until recently again, is encryption-based tools take a lot of time up front to get right, because unlike a traditional sort of tool where the provider knows everything about it, we need to make sure the data is structured properly out the get-go, because we're not going to be able to change it afterwards. We can't see the data. We can't modify the data. So if we get it wrong, we're stuck with that design forever.
Well, I mean, 4 to 6 million years. It's not actually forever, but it's close.
All we need to do is just pull down all the power in Utah, and we'll be fine.
Oh dear.
So, that's where we've been. Collaboration tools and, oddly enough, space, which personally I don't mind. SpiderOak's going
that's
to the moon.
Super cool. Yeah, that's super cool. Let's be honest. I mean, that is just.
Coincidentally, did the decision to shift towards collaboration happen in, say, the last 12 to 18 months?
We actually started with Semicore back in 2015. There was a round of, we got some investment. There was a change of some management, but then kind of some combination of things happening, corporate hijinks, and we're doubled down on this pivot starting around 2017, 2018. But it's just taken a while to get the tool out there. So yeah, that's why you don't really kind of this, we went quiet for a bit in the mid-teens, basically.
Okay,
Gotcha.
No, that makes sense. I was honestly curious. So you've done collaboration tools. You've put encrypted communication and encrypted collaboration and encryption security systems into space systems and space companies, I guess, and their hardware and software. That's fascinating. I've got to ask, I mean, are you still doing just sort of your basic encrypted communication, encrypted backup, encrypted data storage market as well? Or have you literally just walked away from all of it?
So we still have our backup product. You can still sign up for it. And over the coming some amount of time, I can't give you a precise quote, it'll all get kind of rolled in. So that way the one backup stuff is available in Crossclave, and you can use the total new modern architecture and run with it like that. Which also includes fully functioning apps on phones, which I know has been a long bugaboo for customers on one backup, one to upload from their phone. Wow. So eventually, when the backup product gets put out to pasture, it's because there's already an upgrade path giving everyone what they want and more.
Well, let's take a quick break, and we will come back and we will keep peppering you with questions. I've got a few up the encryption lane, where you see things going. Hopefully I'm not throwing you a curveball, but I want to ask your take on one of my favorite topics lately, which is homomorphic encryption. But don't answer yet. We'll take a break and be right back.